Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Getting Hammered. I'm Mary Katharine, your host. My co-host, Vic Matus of the Washington Free Beacon, is here. We are your morning show for any hour. We got a lot going on today. We got a You Love to Hear It from none other than KJP, so stay tuned for that. We got, obviously, news out of Israel, the speaker's race, and cancel culture, or is it accountability culture, comes to the universities. But before that, Vic, how are you doing?
Hello, Mary Katharine. I'm doing fine. I just wanted to add a follow-up to last episode, I should say, not last week's, when I talked about my trip to Dallas. And I can't remember if I mentioned, I don't think I did, that I also got a chance while I was down there to see Sonny and Beth Bunch.
Love it.
Had a lovely time with them and two of our other friends, Peter and Christine Lowe. And so we had gone out to Del Frisco's. And Sonny brought up a question that he had asked me earlier and other people had asked. And it's kind of an awkward personal question, but I'm going to share it with our readers because I feel like I need clarification. I need to clarify is what I'm going to say. So in the news that had come out before all this in the New York Post, that our favorite New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez, over 20 years, which is a long time, since 2003, had spent close to $300,000 at Morton's. And so Sonny, rather insensitively, and in front of my other friends here at this table, said, well, Vic, did you spend as pretty much close to that,
right,
too?
Where would you put your number?
When you combine the Mortons and the Palm together, and I would say the number, it's unclear, but I first of all, it's rather presumptuous to ask why, just because I have a locker at Morton's,
right,
from a long time ago, and I haven't used it,
right,
and you know the face on the wall at the Palm, and I got this new little Landry's special card for you know when I host people and entertain them and do business. Let's not assume that
right,
I'm
just because
near
everyone knows you by name when
That's
you walk
right.
in.
I also stopped counting my points. I just after a certain number of years, I said it's not important.
Also, let's be clear, a lot of that was expensed.
Oh, no, it was all
didn't
expensed.
Spend it.
No, I don't know.
So
I'm not
sure.
I want to assure my family.
I'm not sure it even counts.
I want to assure the Weekly Standard. Oh, wait, thank goodness it's not around anymore. No, I'm kidding. It was terrible. It has nothing to do with what happened to the Standard. I will say this.
Imagine if you were the problem.
It was the one reason. The one reason the Standard went down was
it was all the
expenses.
martinis.
Yes, that's right.
One blue cheese filled olive too many.
I'll tell you the weirdest thing was at the end of the night, having felt generous and being thankful just to be with our friends, we were at Del Frisco's Steakhouse, which is a great steakhouse in Dallas, and the original is from there.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes. I didn't make the reservation. My friend did. But on my way out of the men's room, I caught the waiter and I told him, let me take care of this because, which I did. I did not expense this, okay? But I'm feeling generous and thankful.
This was a real
No,
expense
this is
for
real.
you.
This is
straight
real.
From the heart.
This is straight from the
and
heart.
And the wallet.
Yes. And I said, so let me pay. And the waiter goes, okay, do you want to use your points? And I just looked at him and I said, sure, but how do you? He goes, oh, I know. He said, I know you have the card. I'm like, how does he know I have the card? So that was really weird. But I think he just must have, he was a very attentive waiter and he must have overheard the conversation.
He could tell you just have frequent flyer miles at steakhouses. That's
one of those
he
things.
He just had a feeling about
yes,
you.
the way I ordered.
It's what you give off. If you have a vibe, that's the vibe.
That's the vibe. Okay, so I just wanted to say that the answer is I don't know, and I don't think, and I'd like to say that $300,000 over 20 years, not that much when you think about it.
When you cut it down
when you stretch it out.
Look, there's a lot of days in those years.
A lot of days.
You know?
Mary Katharine, how are you?
I'm all right. We have reached a new toddler phase in our house. So the toddler is almost 2. And I need to put her birthday on my calendar because I keep forgetting that's coming.
Can you on the spot?
To be fair, I have 2 under 2 and have for the last 9
without
months.
actually telling us the dates. Just in your mind, can you actually tell us on the spot if we say, what are the birthdays of all of your kids? Boom,
yes,
you could do it.
I can do it. The problem is that I had a lot of my kids in the fourth quarter of the year.
Okay,
and so it gets pretty jammed up with the calendar in that part of the year because we've got an August, we've got an October, we've got a November, and then we've got 2 early Januaries, Steve and the baby.
I was going to say, don't forget about Steve.
So one advantage is that I'm hanging out in April all by myself.
Oh.
Everyone's got, we're doing a birthday month.
Yeah,
Nothing else is on the calendar, guys. This is the only thing we're doing. Whereas the children get 4 minutes of birthday song, and then we got to move on to Halloween. We got to move on to Thanksgiving.
Well, I was going to say, you're crammed in with the holidays. It's tough.
Yes, it's tricky. It's tricky.
Yeah.
So, at any rate, we're in a new era of toddlerdom, and I try to discourage this with my children, which is the deep attachment to a certain object.
A binky or something,
yes.
as they call it.
And my kids don't generally get attached to a certain object because because it might just be who they are, but it's also because I, knowing myself, little scatterbrained, know the cost if I were to misplace such an item, which I am likely to do. So I don't like them to get into certain things. Well, there's two things going on. The toddler has decided she's very into one particular baby doll, and as always happens, when your toddler's into a baby doll, it's like the scuzziest, dirtiest baby doll that you have. That's the one that they're into, or stuffed animal, whatever it is.
Scuzzy is a good word.
But not only is she into the scuzzy baby doll, she's also into a very scuzzy little mini bottle that goes with the baby doll.
Oh, sure.
And it's like one of those that has the fake liquid in it when you turn it up, except it's long since dried up and like left weird marks all over the inside of the bottle. I'm sure it's not sanitary.
Accoutrements.
Yeah. There's things growing in there, I'm sure. So we have those two items that she's very into. And they always have to be together. And they always have to be with her.
Oh, my gosh.
And so the other night at bedtime, we had this huge meltdown. And my young kids do not melt down at bedtime because Steve has them on such an admirable schedule that their little brains are like, oh, it is time to go to bed. I shall retire now. And she marches up the little stairs and she jumps in her crib and she goes to sleep. That's how things work in our house.
Yes.
She lost it.
Oh, no.
And we couldn't figure out what was going on. And she had the baby. This is the time at which we figured out the stupid bottle was the problem.
Yes.
So she's screaming bloody murder up there. And my husband comes downstairs to try and figure out. Oh, she also refuses to say words. So like she could indicate to us what she needs, but she's like, nah, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to scream. So Steve's like trying to hand her things. She keeps saying no. He finally goes downstairs. It dawns on him that it might be this. He goes downstairs, like ransacks the living room to find a bottle that's approximately 4 inches long, like a little tiny thing. Takes it up. She grabs it, lays down, puts it in the baby's mouth, goes right to sleep. So this is our life now.
Yes. No, it's have you ever seen the movie Best in Show with Christopher Guest, and they lose the busy bee for the time? Where's the busy bee? You know, and Parker Posey's yelling, "Gotta find the busy bee."
This is our busy bee.
Yeah.
So now in our house, I'm sure there's going to be like, who's got eyes on the bottle? Does anyone have eyes on the bottle?
Well, particularly because it's going to be technically a small bottle. I mean, it's
very small
proportional, and it's not attached to the baby.
So now we're deciding whether, like, do we just need to hide the baby at bedtime and like cure her of this flip out, or do we continue to feed it? I don't know what the right parenting decision is.
Well, here's another thing, though. You know what works in your favor if you need to use it as a stick in a carrot stick situation.
Mm-hmm. She's also occasionally very into a specific book on the bookshelf, but again, unwilling to tell me which one of the books. So I end up just taking books and handing them to her, and she screams, and then I put it back up, screams, put it back up, screams, put it back up. And then finally you give her the one. She's so very reasonable when you finally give her the one she wanted.
Does the book change?
It's usually The Very Hungry Caterpillar, but occasionally
That's a good one.
It's something different. Yeah. So anyway, you got to brief everybody on these things so that everyone listening to the podcast now knows how to solve the problem if she's flipping out on you. And my whole family will know how to solve these problems, because I might have to take all the books off the bookshelf because she keeps like waking up in the morning and be like,
to get the Hungry Caterpillar.
I'm like, girl, it's 6:15. You're not. Well, I'm not reading the Hungry Caterpillar right now.
Okay, quick question for you, and we can go on. So you've read this book a million times.
Oh yeah.
Okay. The page where it spreads and you see everything that the caterpillar ate, right? Because it's very hungry. What would you choose? One thing.
My first thought, so I'm just going to go with my gut, was the salami.
Yeah, that was mine. That's why we're on the show together. Good for you. It's meaty. It looks meaty.
Can I ask one question? Where was this caterpillar that he had this smorgasbord available to him?
It was a picnic, and it was a charcuterie board.
I mean, it was quite a picnic. We got plums, we got apples, we got oranges, we got
lollipops.
Pie,
no, I forget. There's
lollipops,
candy in
salami.
there. Yeah.
Was it a fair? Maybe it was at the Texas State Fair.
It was at Texas State Fair, yeah.
The caterpillar was at the Texas State Fair. At any rate, he's a butterfly now. It's beautiful. Okay. Moving on.
Yeah.
We've got serious news to talk about.
Yeah.
Oh, but it's nice to take a break and
It is.
from the news. I'll start off with just speaking of it's been moving and sometimes jarring to spend time with my own children when I know that other people's children are in danger, and that's part of the what's going on with Israel that's hard to witness and hard to watch and hard to think about. But I continue to try to do that and try to pray because I know that it must be done. Here's a mom, just to set the stage for what's still happening in Israel as they mount an attack against Gaza. This is a mom talking about how her son was taken from her into Gaza, and Andrea Mitchell on MSNBC asks her about those attacks on Gaza.
Yeah, I'm sure you want them to be with people they know so that they're not alone there. But what are your feelings about the attacks against Gaza right now? How can the government...
I must say, look, you're looking for a symmetrical situation, and I must say it isn't. If you were dealing with a war who is between two countries don't take children hostages. I'm sorry. It's against the laws of war. It's against humanity. It's against anything that we all believe in. Every time we had missiles shot at us, I used to say to my children that they should be sympathetic towards the children of Gaza because they suffer a lot more than they do. I'm not sure I still believe in it now. And I must say the only worry I have now from the bombings in Gaza is the fact that my children are there. I can't be sympathetic anymore. I can't be sympathetic to animal human beings. Well, they're not really human beings who came into my house, broke everything, stole everything, took my children from their bedrooms and took them to the Gaza Strip. Israel never done that and will never do. So there is no symmetry. I'm sorry.
Do you want the government...
I'm sorry for being so emotional.
Do you want the government to put the top priority on getting the hostages out before they retaliate?
I want my government to put it on the first priority, and I want the world to put it on first priority. I think any mother in the world should try and imagine her children under that situation and then think again. That's all I want. I want the world to ask them to release children, to release elderlies, to release the civilians they took. There is no reason to hold them there. They are not soldiers, they are not part of the war, and they have nothing to do with it. We gave them work permits. We really believed that this was the way to move their economy, to reconnect these two so-called countries. This is not the way a country behaves. This is the way that a terror organization behaves. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Did Andrea Mitchell say, well, no, seriously, what do you think about the attacks on Gaza? Did she continue on that, or did she just back off?
she to her credit, she lets her just talk.
Because that's the gut reaction question from the media is, of course.
Yes. Well, and there's
an equivalency issue.
It was the reason that many people who stayed silent for several days stayed silent so that they could chime in as soon as Israel retaliated.
Oh, yeah. That's exactly right.
And then they could say, well, both sides.
God forbid that they reacted in the first 24 to 48 hours because, they've never done that before in other issues.
Yeah,
with the reversal of Roe v. Wade or George Floyd.
Never knee-jerk reactions.
Never.
Here is a clip of Jake Tapper on CNN saying something that I think we've all thought in the last several days. Although I'm sure there are many people who weren't surprised. Like I said, I'm not surprised that the universities and university populations and many people of the intellectual left had aligned themselves with the Palestinian cause. That, of course, I was very clear on that.
Yeah.
And that they, in fact, also thought that many of the terroristic tactics were okay, sort of, in service of that. But it got very stark this week. Here's Tapper.
These last few days have been a real eye-opening period for a lot of people, a lot of Democrats, a lot of progressives, in terms of anti-Semitism on the left. a lot of people who seem more shocked at dehumanizing language used by world leaders to describe Hamas than what Hamas actually perpetrated on Saturday.
Indeed. For the record, AOC, who is generally very concerned about humanitarian issues, and one would think would be very concerned about the kidnap, killing, torturing of civilians, elderly, and children and women. We talked about this in the last show, and I appreciate that she condemned the rally by the DSA that was pro-Hamas. But she only did it when she was asked by Politico.
Yeah.
And then she has a personal account that has many million, I think 12 million followers. She has a personal Twitter account where she took several days, and the first thing she tweeted was when she found YouTube of an angry protester, pro-Israel protester, saying, wipe out Gaza or something along those lines. His intemperate remarks were the thing that she needed to comment on, not the murder of civilians wholesale, 1,200 now.
Yeah.
So she did that, and then she's followed up on it since a couple times, but not with the condemnation of the actual terrorist acts.
No.
She left that to a very short comment from her official account from her office.
That's right. So like you said, you just have to wait for the right opportunity to jump in order to legitimize the both sides argument. She was silent from around October 6th until Tuesday night. That's how long it took her for finally to send out that tweet.
And I should note, she's been better than much of the squad. Rashida Tlaib.
Jamal Bowman, too, by the way, who had condemned that rally in New York.
Right.
And now apparently the Democratic Socialists of America are kind of panicking as well and apologizing for, quote, the confusion.
Oh, was there confusion?
There was confusion.
Black Lives Matter didn't apologize for confusion for the fact that Black Lives Matter Chicago published a tweet and a graphic with a paraglider saying they stand with Palestine. It was very clear what was happening there. We align with this cause, and we don't care that these were the methods. When they got lambasted for it, they did another tweet that just said the same sentiment, but slightly more gently than the...
Yeah.
It's like, well, you actually just believe this.
Right.
And I think it's important that we understand that people believe that. Rashida Tlaib was asked about attacks on civilians and murder of civilians, and she just wouldn't answer. This is in the halls of Congress.
That's right. It was actually a very specific question about the 40 babies who were slaughtered and the confirmation coming from multiple sources now that, the terrible thing that happened to them. I know there's a family podcast. I won't get into those details, but you know what I'm talking about. And she could have said, horrible if true, but it's not true. Or it hasn't been verified. I hope it's not true, or I doubt it because that would be a terrible thing if it were to happen. Just decided to say nothing.
Or just like that particular detail aside, we have plenty of evidence of awful, awful, awful things that happened in the name of something that, in the name of a people who I want to support. Like, you could say something.
So I feel like, and I said this on the last episode, and it's like a bat signal went up, right? Saying, everybody, this is the moment where you can now finally show your true colors. And, that sort of subtext of anti-Semitism can now actually come out and say, you could actually say it now out loud. Yeah. And I mean, what's shocking is when these atrocities were being recorded almost, like live streamed, you're hearing about this almost instantaneously. Sure, there are people who are denying it and say, oh, this didn't happen, or this is, exaggerated, or it's unverified. But there's a good chunk of people out there who, when this happened, they just embraced it and said, yeah, basically they had it coming. Whether you be the elderly, whether you be a child, or innocent men, women, and all the awful things they did to them, they were like, yeah. And you know what? Israel has done the same.
Well, and this is the oppressor-oppressed theories that are that have captured all of our major institutions, by the way. How many major corporations gave money to BLM and will never answer for them embracing
it was so fashionable to say,
right,
free Palestine and support, and eventually you're getting to the part where you support Hamas. And there's actually video has just resurfaced from, like 10 years ago or 12 years ago Robert Malley, who until recently was Biden administration's Iran envoy, the
Yes.
special envoy to Iran.
Removed from his post and from his security clearance
From
for
security
being
clearance.
aligned with the Iranians.
That's right. He's under investigation for that. And this video that surfaced was of him at some panel discussion where he is defending Hamas and saying it's a cultural organization and
They run soup kitchens.
yes, no, they do a lot of good things. None of this should be a surprise. Over the years, we've seen this increase as well in anti-Semitic crimes, right, happening in New York and elsewhere throughout the
And
country.
often
Europe.
spiking right after an
Yeah.
Israeli counterattack.
That's right, and that's right, Mary Katharine. These are counterattacks. All the talk about when the IDF goes in to a town or into Gaza and they just have to level a block or something, right? There's no comment on why they're doing this in the first place. They don't want to be there.
Right.
Remember, they wanted to give God. They, as we mentioned in the last show, they uprooted forcefully more than 20,000 Israelis living there. This was supposed to be theirs.
They would have liked nothing more than to
Yeah.
just have folks live their lives there. By the way, one of the things in the sort of reckoning with the intel and
This
what
is it.
people
This is a
didn't
reckoning.
know, one of the things that I've seen reports of is that, and this is fairly unsurprising, Israel was letting many tens of thousands of Gazan residents come to work in Israel. So they commuted back and forth. So people who tell you this is an open air prison, they're commuting back and forth to make a living in Israel because they can't make a living in Gaza because the leaders in Gaza, who were elected by the people of Gaza, and then the people of Gaza were never given another election because they are terrorists and they don't do elections, they won't build a life for them there. They won't use the aquifers for water. They won't create economies. So Israel's sending people back and forth. And it turns out, as some on the kibbutzes who were eyewitnesses to this noticed, that they knew these faces, that they were faces that had commuted in, which makes perfect sense because you would have knowledge of the area.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're dealing with here. I want to, much of this is maddening, but I want to give a huge, you love to hear it.
Oh, yeah.
For Karine Jean-Pierre, an unreserved, you love to hear it. I am cheering for this statement. She's asked about the members of Congress that we just mentioned who have not been loud about
either
their
both sides were blaming Israel.
opposition to Hamas. Here we go.
What is the president's message to...
Okay, the pool should start leaving, and then we're going to take this last question.
Thank you, Green. What is the president's message to members of Congress who seem to be equating the Hamas terror attack with actions that were previously taken by Israel?
Say that one more time. Everybody's moving around. I apologize.
What is the president's message to members of Congress who seem to be equating the Hamas terror attack with actions that were previously taken by Israel?
Look, here's the thing, and which congressional members?
Well, there have been some members of Congress who have called for a ceasefire, and they have not gone as far as backing the administration's call for support for Israel.
So look, I've seen some of those statements this weekend, and we're going to continue to be very clear. We believe they're wrong. We believe they're repugnant, and we believe they're disgraceful. Our condemnation belongs squarely with terrorists who have brutally murdered, raped, kidnapped hundreds of Israelis. There can be no equivocation about that. There are not two sides here. There are not two sides. President Biden has been clear on where he has stood. You heard from him directly today. You heard from him also on Saturday on this. There's been multiple statements from this president, and he's taking action to provide additional support to ensure that Israel has what they need to defend themselves. All right.
Yes.
Good for her.
Good for her. Enjoy the moment. I'm going to say this. Not to.
I stand with KJP.
I'm going to say this. Enjoy the moment now, not to dampen it, but we will see how long the resolve lasts. But it is an important moment at this time because she could have easily said, "I'm not familiar with the statements. I haven't seen it." Next question, because she does that a lot.
Yep.
Where if she doesn't want to answer the question, she'll say, "I'm not familiar with what this person said, therefore I don't want to comment on it." But it seems to be that they're all clearly on message here about what has happened. And it's this wake-up call, and it's this moral reckoning, because you're either on the side of the baby killers, right, or you are, or you're against them at this point, because we've always been saying this, and I worked at the Weekly Standard for more than 20 years. which is that Hamas and a lot of these forces out there, PFLP, Hezbollah, you name it, their goal is not coexistence with Israel. They have always stated that the goal is to wipe Israel off the map, from river to the sea, and people have to chant this. Netanyahu said this, I believe it was him years ago, that they don't want a peace of Israel or a peace with Israel. They want a peace with no Israel, right? No. But somehow
they want a one-state solution / final solution.
That's right.
Yeah.
And now the cat's really out of the bag because they have come out and made their intentions known. And so for all the people who sort of just nodded along and pretended not to, give much thought to what their always stated intentions were, they have to come to grips with this now and say, well, how do you feel about it? These people who say they want to are actually trying to do it right now. And I was glad to see that Karine Jean-Pierre and obviously President Biden were not equivocating. And
yes.
I don't know if you wanted to talk about the Biden speech.
So I want to play a little bit of the Biden speech. Yeah. We just as an update at this point, and hopefully the number does not grow, it sounds like 25 Americans died in this attack. There are Americans who are hostages
Multiple
in Gaza.
Hostages.
The president said at one point, he couldn't obviously tell us what they're doing to get Americans out of Gaza because, that makes sense, security issues, but that they're working very hard on it. John Kirby has said, I've been a little weak on how we're going to get just Americans out of Israel proper. He says they've discussed things with domestic airlines and international airlines, but it's unclear exactly what we're doing.
Yeah,
some citizens have been asked to sign a promissory note for their flight back. This is one thing where there's a record of failure on this in the Biden administration. People are right to be concerned that they don't know how to get Americans out of these places because in the past they have not. And why is
not
there
a great track record.
Why is there not a plan for this? However, credit where it's due. Okay. Biden's speech is quite good. He's a little bit like, is it his antique Corvette that's sitting in the garage where it's like, the engine takes a while to get going, and then once the engine's running, I'm unsure if it's going to continue to run.
There's something going on with the eyes.
But the words, the words are correct.
Right.
And so I want to give
turn the
credit.
volume up. Actually, you have to turn the volume up on his voice.
I want to give credit to that and play just a little clip of him.
It matters that Americans see what's happening. I mean, I've been doing this a long time. I never really thought that I would see and have confirmed pictures of terrorists beheading children. I never thought I'd ever. Anyway.
By the way, another thing we could do is just freeze the $6 billion again. Apparently, we do have the power to do that, and I think maybe until we figure out what's happening with Iran.
That is an option. That is certainly going to upset some members of the left because it's sort of going back on his promise and the whole thing. But it is obviously worth considering if we have the power to stop this from happening. He doesn't mention Iran in the speech.
Right.
And part of it, I can't help but think, is because of the implications. They pushed hard, right? They lifted a number of these sanctions that were that have resulted in something like $80 billion in illicit oil revenue to come to Iran's way. And obviously they were very desperate to go restart the JCPOA Iran deal that President Trump had suspended. And of course we have this ring of, I don't know if you want to call them spies, informants, and sympathizers within the State Department and the Department of Defense.
I think those are all fair words, yeah.
Including Ariana Tabatabai and of course Robert Malley.
Maybe just boot her. Can we get her out
of
there? I would hate for cancel culture to go so far that we take out Iranian-aligned intelligence officials at the Pentagon, but maybe it's time. Maybe it's time.
It's time
to cancel her.
I can see why they don't want to make the Iran connection right now, but that's pretty bad. And the other thing is, of course, everything that Trump did, they wanted to reverse, and that included restarting aid to the Palestinians. But that, again, was, as I mentioned in the last show, unconditional aid.
Yeah.
And there was concern, as Adam Credo reported, that a lot of that money would end up in the hands of terrorists.
Right. The State Department itself under Biden was like, hey, this is going to probably encourage this. Do you guys want to consider that? And this is how
they spent a lot of money on weapons. They certainly didn't spend it on infrastructure. You mentioned the aquifers. I mean, they could have had their own source of water.
Yes.
But they let that
They have other priorities.
go to waste.
In contrast to Biden, can I play a little bit of former President Trump?
Oh, okay.
He's chiming in. Now, he was sort of distracted with his own issues during his first
He's got a lot on his mind
of Israel.
Right. Sure.
But was like supportive.
Okay.
Here's what we got in a speech at a rally for supporters in Florida last night.
Room, we followed the whole thing, and about 15 seconds later, it was all over, and we did it. But I'll never forget that Bibi Netanyahu let us down. That was a very terrible thing, I will say that. And so when I see sometimes the intelligence, you talk about the intelligence, or you talk about some of the things that went wrong over the last week, they've got to straighten it out, because they're fighting potentially a very big force. They're fighting potentially Iran. And when they have people saying the wrong things, everything they say is being digested by these people, because they're vicious and they're smart. And boy, are they vicious, because nobody's ever seen the kind of sight that we've seen. Nobody's ever seen it. But they cannot play games. So we were disappointed by that, very disappointed. But we did the job ourselves, and it was absolute precision, magnificent, beautiful job.
He's talking about, I believe, the killing of Soleimani.
Oh, okay.
But wait for it.
And then Bibi tried to take credit for it. That wasn't good. That didn't make me feel too good, but that's all right. So they got to strengthen themselves up.
Okay, so that's the first clip.
I'm glad he's sharing how he felt, because I was wondering, how do you feel about
how
this?
Do you feel? He's talking about the strike on Soleimani. Mm-hmm. He has beef with Netanyahu because Netanyahu congratulated President Biden and Vice President Harris elect after they were elected and declared winners.
He didn't declare it illegitimate, right?
And so he's mad at Netanyahu for this reason. And so, as a result, he is making the largest slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust about, checks notes, himself. Himself. It is about himself.
You're almost suggesting that he keeps grudges. I don't know if that's what you're saying.
It's just so bad. Yeah. It's so bad. Here's another one. You want to hear this one?
2 nights ago, I read all of Biden's security people. Can you imagine? National defense people. And they said, gee, I hope Hezbollah doesn't attack from the north.
Good job. Unequivocal support for the state of Israel. So full-throated understanding of foreign policy.
You know, there's a way to sort of talk about what he's trying to say, right? There's a way to explain. Not that you would want to share this with a campaign crowd, okay? So the first thing is the Hezbollah smart thing really sounds weird.
Yeah. No,
I think what he means is diabolical,
well,
right?
He's like, people get mad at me when I say things like this. Yeah, people do have concerns when you are routinely complimentary to murderers and totalitarians. They do get concerned about that.
Yeah, he was in love with Erdogan, and of course he had that meeting with Kim Jong-un.
But then also he's deriding Israeli intelligence, from the stage.
They don't need to hear this
in a way
Shin
that's
Bet does not need
just not helpful at the moment.
There's going to be a very serious intelligence reckoning in Israel because of this.
He's
also need to add to it. It's
wrong. Yeah. Hezbollah did not attack from the. So it's just like
there was reports of these aircraft coming in, so maybe he was just anticipating.
But this is a perfect distillation of Trump as world leader.
Yeah,
he gets the facts wrong. He makes it about himself. And he makes it about himself so much that he is unable to offer the unequivocal support, the likes of which KJP and Biden have just offered.
It's like a role reversal. And especially Netanyahu, he's now part of this unity government.
Right.
And so they can actually be all focused on, and their goal is unmistakable goal, which is to eradicate Hamas. There is not going to be one. They're not going to care what the rest of the world's going to say and how many UN resolutions they pass. And again, it's great that everyone's with them now, but I imagine that that's not going to last long once you get to the ugly reality of war and trying to get back every single hostage, because that is, for Israel, they don't see this as glorified martyrdom.
Right.
That every life matters to them to get back, and they have to do everything within their power. And certainly I hope the United States feels the same way. Netanyahu, he's right that Netanyahu is, facing this crisis and could be the next Golda Meir right after the Yom Kippur War happened and she was caught flat-footed, and people are going to say, how did this happen? He's got to deal with that problem, but he doesn't need to hear Trump, stoking those flames and saying, man, he really dropped the ball here. It's not the time. But again, does any of this surprise you? Wouldn't it be surprised if he gave a nuanced speech saying that we're with the people of Israel? Just leave it at that.
By the way,
Totally on brand.
as I've often said about Trump, I have no doubt that at some point he will give a section of a speech or a statement that is that, because as he can keep a lid on his id for very brief periods of time.
Brief.
And then we get this.
Yeah.
Speaking of dropping the ball, I did want to note there is a representative, Corey Mills, who has been in Israel finding American citizens.
Oh, my goodness.
And getting them out because, once again, as in Afghanistan, the ball's been dropped there. There are a lot of other countries, and these are just facts. A lot of other countries have gotten people out before we have. And I was talking to actually former chief of staff to Trump, Mick Mulvaney, about this yesterday. And he's like, there's supposed to be plans for this that you take off a shelf and you say, hey, we have a contract with this charter company or this airline that's supposed to help us in these situations in this country.
Right.
Pick up the plans and make it happen. Or are we just, this is the thing that worries me about all of our institutions is like, where are the adults? Adults have contingency plans, right? Instead, Mills is over in Israel gathering buses of tourists from church groups to try to get them home to America.
Well, I mean, it's the same thing with the evacuation disaster from Afghanistan and how many Americans and also Afghans who had supported the U.S. military, whose lives and the families' lives are in danger, were left behind. And it was up to, individual groups and private groups and units and to get these people, extract them out of this terrible place. And you'll just see that happen again because they cannot rely on the United States.
Which is why people are well within their rights to ask very pointed questions about this of the administration.
By the way, I like my mother-in-law, who is usually insanely. It'll take several years, but then she ends up being right about certain things. One of them was, she said, if you are overseas, she would say, and a crisis develops, you are in trouble. Do not go to the U.S. Embassy. Go to the British Embassy, the Canadian Embassy. That's what she said, because they'll do a better job. That's what, I don't know. And all of a sudden I'm thinking about this. I'm like, oh,
you're
my
pondering
gosh.
it. You're pondering
She's right again.
Okay.
All right.
I do want to talk about the academia problem.
Yes, definitely.
Matthew Continetti writing in the Free Beacon, and we are going to get to some other stories, but this is so wide-reaching, and the reaction to it is so heinous in some areas that I just want to talk through this. Matt Continetti writing about the university responses says the toxic atmosphere of anti-Semitism, this is in the Free Beacon, has several sources. One is the corrupt university system. 51 U.S. student groups have written a letter that concludes, we support the resistance, we support the liberation movement, and we indisputably support the uprising. The president of NYU's Student Bar Association said that Israel's, quote, apartheid regime is the only one to blame for the chaos. 31 Palestinian solidarity groups at Harvard University echoed her despicable sentiment. Swarthmore Students for Justice in Palestine said it, quote, honors the martyrs of Hamas. Graffiti writers scrawled, long live the Intifada and Israel is dead on Stanford's sidewalks. Students at George Washington University, one of the most expensive private institutions of higher learning in the country, held a vigil for the martyrs of Palestine. This is a small sample of dangerous student idiocy. A full catalog would be endless. So some consequences are coming for these things. For instance, the person who crafted the New York University law students...
the NYU Bar Association
NYU
student president.
Yes.
Student president.
The head of that organization who wrote the statement has lost a promised job with a high-end law firm.
That's right. From Winston and Strawn, they revoked it.
Perhaps we should ask why a freedom fighter for the dispossessed Palestinians was interested in a high-end, white-collar, $300K job at a law firm defending, like, pharmaceuticals. And the fact is that like these people are quote unquote freedom fighters and pushing for this wanton murder from the comfort of their rich universities and their to be rich jobs. And it's despicable.
There are the universities that are in question here that you mentioned that are in Matt's column. A lot of them are really hard to get into. So you imagine that the kids who do get into, say, Stanford or Harvard are pretty smart. And yet they seem to have questions about Israel's right to exist. That's the concern. So part of it is, and I mentioned this on the last show when I saw those like two average college dudes just, saying, hey, man, free Palestine, as they were driving by. I heard it. And I saw them as they drove by. Because it's fashionable, right? Hey, this is cool, without really thinking how they feel about the Jews. And I'd like to think that in their mind, they're just not that bright and not thinking and not in their minds, you know what, I actually really hate Jewish people. I really hope that's not the case. And they're just not thinking. On the other hand, there are a lot of smart kids here who signed these statements. The woman at from the NYU Bar Association, they do think this. This is not just fashionable for them.
Right.
It's their opinion. I mean, in a very sad and dark way, we should not be surprised because this sort of thinking it has radicalized universities for a long time. And this sort of thinking that is at the university level is now even before that now, as you know, in high schools where they're trying to get kids more activated, become activists for certain causes. And then eventually these kids, they graduate, they enter the workforce with those beliefs intact.
Well, and you end
so we
up
shouldn't
with
be
this,
surprised.
You end up with this paradigm where it's oppressed versus oppressor. And as long
colonizers.
as... Right.
Yeah.
And as long as someone counts as the oppressor by race or by class or by location, no matter whether they're a combatant or not, in this philosophy that is cultivated on college campuses, those people are combatants. They are fair game.
That's right.
And as you see at these rallies, by any means necessary, it's fine to decolonize them, right? So among the consequences, which I appreciate this, some institutional consequences. Mark Rowan, writing for the Free Press, who is on the board for UPenn, says just outright, we got to stop giving money until some of these people resign because the lunatics are running the asylum and this is not okay.
It might be too
late. He notes that University of Pennsylvania sponsored a Palestine Rights Literary Festival. It was hosted by various university departments and affiliates, advocated ethnic cleansing of Jews, referred to them as European settlers, and repeated various blood libels. UPenn President Elizabeth McGill and Board Chair Scott Bach permitted UPenn to sponsor this conference and failed to condemn its hate-filled calls for violence. So he's saying, like, let's hit them where it hurts.
Right.
I appreciate that. If you turn a blind eye to this stuff forever, there's a great Babylon Bee headline that really crystallizes it, which says, Harvard student leaves lecture on microaggressions to attend Kill the Jews rally.
Yeah.
Like,
no,
that's what is happening
that
here.
might not even be a parody.
No, do they care about microaggressions or not? Because I feel like we've got some macroaggressions going on.
Well, it's okay for
here.
some and not for others.
Well, right, because Jews are the oppressor.
Right.
In this situation, right? In the hierarchy, you can do whatever you want.
And you're either just for eliminating the Jews in Israel or all the Jews. There's your spectrum.
Now, I want to ask us one question because I have some thoughts on this.
Sure.
A lot of people are saying, "Oh, now cancel culture is okay." Because at least one person has said, like, look, all these people who signed on to this Harvard statement, I would like to know who they are because I would like to not hire them
right.
in the hedge fund world, right? Okay. I have some nuanced thoughts on this. The problem with cancel culture is three things. It does not have perspective about the offense, quote unquote, that is being punished. It does not have a proportionate response to that offense. And it has no path to redemption.
Yeah.
Those are the problems with cancel culture. It is my opinion that if you are to cancel someone, if they are to lose job prospects and have economic consequences, that the offense and the words for which they are losing that should be about as extreme as possible. I want wide latitude, particularly for college students, to say dumb things. I would say that this New York law or bar association, or New York, what is it? New York law.
NYU Bar Association. Student Bar Association.
NYU Student Bar Association statement. The person who wrote it has engaged in some of the most despicable speech we can think of. Pro-genocidal and terrorist activities, right? So I think that qualifies as disqualifying speech. Then you talk about, okay, we need a proportionate response. For that person to lose a jobs prospect, look, again, free companies, as we've always been told, have a right to make these decisions.
Yeah.
No law firm wants to be associated with the person who wrote that. I do think, however, the calls for every single student in every single one of those organizations, that's where you get a proportion problem.
Yes,
because I think
apparently there were some students who had already graduated, but they had, it was on their, CV that they belonged to the organization way before any of this happened and before the organization actually decided to join the other groups, like at Harvard, for example.
Well, and you know how student organizations work. I doubt a lot of these people screened this or had any opportunity to know it was coming out.
Yeah.
Those who have distanced themselves from it, and this is the path to redemption, I want them to get the opportunity to see this is what my fellow travelers believe, and I don't want to be part of it. Now, do we know if all of those distancings are sincere? I don't know. But it's giving people a chance to step away from this brink, and I don't want to discourage that.
Some of them, will say, you know what, this is horrible, or this is, maybe it's a revelation to some that when they kept on saying, that they were supporting Hamas, that this also meant death to Jews. And now it's occurred to them, oh, maybe this is not a good thing.
Like, from the river to the sea, if I actually look at the map that does have some implications.
Yeah. But I think others are just going to keep that part quiet again.
Yeah.
And they will always remain anti-Semitic. What annoyed me is there was this delay in statements now coming out from various universities that are now openly and more vocally condemning Hamas's attacks and not being both sides and this whole moral equivalency thing. But they waited until the pressure became too much and they were forced to, because these administrators are cowards.
And then they're still pretty mealy-mouthed about it.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Let's give a hand to Ben Sass.
Yes.
Of the University of Florida. I'm going to unreservedly praise the University of Florida and KJP today. Can you believe it?
This
Vic?
is a big day.
This is from his statement. The opposite of mealy-mouthed. I will not tiptoe around this simple fact. What Hamas did is evil and there is no defense for terrorism. This shouldn't be hard. Sadly, too many people in elite academia have been so weakened by their moral confusion that when they see videos of raped women, hear of a beheaded baby, or learn of a grandmother murdered in her home, the first reaction of some is to provide context and try to blame the raped women, babies, or the murdered grandmother. In other grotesque cases, they express simple support for the terrorists. This thinking isn't just wrong, it's sickening. It's dehumanizing. It is beneath people called to educate our next generation of Americans. He goes on to say, and I appreciate this too, we will protect our students and we will protect speech. This is always true. Our Constitution protects the rights of people to make abject idiots of themselves. But I also want to be clear about this. We will protect our Jewish students from violence. If anti-Israel protests come, we will absolutely be ready to act if anyone dares to escalate beyond peaceful protests. Speech is protected, violence and vandalism are not. Wow! It seems so easy when he does it.
I remember when he announced that he was retiring from the Senate, and there are many conservatives, not many, but, Trump supporters, I should say, who were, very happy to see him go, including the president himself, right? Because he was always a nuisance to Trump. And I thought to myself, that's a shame because, he's a pretty well-spoken statesman. I might not agree with everything he says, but, reasonable, nuanced, smart, conservative. And going to university, we'll see how he does. But now I begin to think maybe there was a reason that he left to become a university president and being here at this time and setting this example versus the other cowardly administrators. It's a good thing. Well, and also
a little bit in the model of one of my favorite politicians of all time, Mitch Daniels.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
President of Purdue.
Well, Purdue. Sorry, sorry
yeah,
about that.
Don't insult. As the president of Purdue, he froze costs. He protected free speech. He spoke up for students. I mean, it is important to model this and to cultivate something else.
Particularly if you're coming from certain states, like Nebraska still has 2 Republican senators, so it's fine. It's not like there was a loss there.
I also want to thank Congressman Shri Thanedar, who's an Indian American member of the squad, who's he has resigned from DSA. He is no longer a part of it. He says, after the brutal terrorist attacks on Israel, which included the indiscriminate murder, rape, and kidnapping of innocent men, women, and children, I can no longer associate with an organization unwilling to call out terrorism in all its forms. Sunday's hate-filled and anti-Semitic rally in New York City, promoted by the New York City DSA, makes it impossible for me to continue my affiliation. I stand with Israel and its right to defend itself. There is no place for moral equivocation in the face of unadulterated evil, as we have seen from Hamas. So, again, you can come back from the brink, right? And we want people to do that. So those are my thoughts on the accountability culture versus cancel culture. If there was ever to be accountability for something, that speech certainly qualifies.
Right. And we have, I mean, this is just the beginning. I mean, this thing's going to go on for a very long time.
Yes.
And having to hopefully successfully extricate hostages, it's going to be costly. And we'll see what happens. And it's just a question of resolve for the rest of the world and how long are they willing to put up with? Because I don't know if they think that the plan is just to, somehow magically take the hostages back and then keep Hamas in place.
No,
because
they can't do that.
I think they're done dealing with Hamas, since they've been dealing with them since about 2007.
Well, and this is the point of calling Hamas ISIS.
Yeah.
Guess who the whole world agreed needed to be eradicated.
Right. Eradicated.
Not just dealt with and contained, but eradicated.
Right.
So if Hamas is ISIS, that's the goal.
Yeah.
You know what else is going to last forever?
Yeah, the speaker race.
Yeah.
No. Okay, go ahead. What's happening? You must have an update for me that I don't know. It's already done. It's a done deal. Habemus orator, I was going to say. We have a speaker. The white smoke went up.
Here's the thing. It's tricky because if we record this now and say this is going to last forever, by the time we're done recording they're going to be like, actually, maybe we should
should say this is going to go on forever.
We should will it into existence that by the time this airs, there will be a speaker and we will be totally wrong. Wouldn't that be neat?
Yes, I was totally wrong about the 99 members of Congress who voted for Jim Jordan and the at least half dozen who say they are not going to vote for Steve Scalise. Maybe I can't believe I was wrong about that.
I can't believe you were proven wrong so quickly.
I can't believe that Lauren Boebert said, I'm voting for Steve Scalise.
Okay, so to be clear, we don't know what's going to happen.
You're listening. You know more than we do. But
as I keep saying, I'm running out of smart sounding ways to say I don't know what these crazy people are going to do. But after our last recording, during which I said, you know what would be neat is if a serious moment really made people rise to the occasion.
Yeah.
And this caucus came in and got itself in line and agreed on a speaker. And do you know what happened? Do you know what happened, Vic? The first thing I saw in the speaker race after we stopped recording was Nancy Mace comes strolling up and she's dressed as Hester Princegram. Getting all over.
Did you make that up?
I did. I coined that one. Getting all over the social media and the regular media, improbably, in a Trumpian-like way, making herself the alleged sort of victim of the week. And it's like, hey, maybe hold off on that pronouncement.
It was really tough.
I guess the idea is that she's like a persecuted woman in this caucus for her vote to oust McCarthy among those 8. Look, I don't see it, and it seems like a silly way of expressing oneself.
I'm just glad that I got the reference because, of course, I watched the movie, The Scarlet Letter, starring Demi Moore.
Of course you did.
Yes, it was great. Certain parts. Did well on the quadrants. It's a different time in my life, the quadrants. I can't. But anyway, and Gary Oldman, I just want to say. It was an interesting movie. Different ending, by the way.
So that's how the whole affair started, shall we say. No pun intended.
Sorry.
The affair.
My prediction, by the way, so you're going to hear this and you're going to say, I can't believe he was right about this, right? We do have a Speaker Scalise. He had to make some concessions to Matt Gaetz, including that he would step down if he said something that Matt Gaetz didn't like, or if he forgot to say please or thank you. Other than that, it's fine.
So as it stands, Scalise was nominated within the party, right?
Yeah.
But it must go to the full House.
It was not a landslide, though.
Right. And there was much support for Jim Jordan. Jordan himself has said that on the floor with the full House that he would nominate Scalise. But it is unclear, as always, that anyone has control over the people who support them. It's unlikely that he has any control over them. I have thought that Jordan himself has comported himself quite well during all of this, during both speaker races.
Again, you have a choice. That's fine. Yeah. He's gracious about it.
So Liam Donovan, who I always turn to in these times for his dark and informed takes on this, says, here's the fundamental problem. No matter if Scalise cobbles together the numbers, or even if Jordan somehow gets his shot, this is not a stable coalition interested in unity, let alone success. That was clear before, but today is a reminder that there will be no catharsis.
Great.
Isn't that fun?
Great.
Another person writes, this is true and comes back to the fundamental problem. You can figure out the buy-ups and side deals to get one vote one time, but the speakership requires an ongoing procedural coalition, and the settlement to create that doesn't seem possible right now for the House GOP. Would love to be proved wrong by the time this comes out.
You want a light piece of news?
Sure. Is there one?
There is. Well, it's one to ponder. I don't know if it's light, but it's one to ponder. In the Wall Street Journal, there was a story about the secret to longevity. We get so fixated on what can I do to live forever or live long, right? But there are people who feel like they want to live to 150 or live forever because they cannot come to grips with mortality or have faith issues that make them fearful of death. Okay. Right. I know people like this. So the Wall Street Journal, I'm just going to read to you what it says, which is about 25% of your ability to live to 90 is determined by genetics, says Dr. Thomas Pearls, a professor of medicine at Boston University, who leads the New England Centenarian Study, which has followed centenarians and their family members since 1995. By age 100, it's roughly 50% genetic, he estimates, and by around 106, 75% genetic. Yeah. So why am I eating my super seed loaf?
No, I don't think you need
sandwich
to. I don't
with
think
mustard.
You need to.
You don't think so?
No,
I'll just die next year. That's, that's because it is.
Here's the thing. There's
always
more here.
Maintained this.
Look, I think we're on a good track.
Okay.
This is a neurologist
yes.
And a team of researchers have found links between longevity and even short amounts of exercise, social activities, such as going to church, check, and this is where we sort of fall out. Modest caffeine and alcohol intake. Let's move past that, though.
Define modest.
Then we have superagers, or people over the age of 80 whose cognitive abilities are on par with those 20 to 30 years younger, reported having more warm, trusting, high-quality relationships with other people, and having a positive outlook on life. And I think we are both good at making friends and seeing the bright side.
Well, look at that. Look at that. I agree 100%. And I also wanted to mention a couple of examples here. For example, Trump eating fast food all the time.
Oh, dude, that guy's living forever.
His father made it to 93. I just read about this. James Dewar, who was the inventor of the Twinkie, he ate one, he said, every day. He lived to 88. And here's my other favorite is Don Gorski, who is the famous Big Mac eater. He started eating several Big Macs a day since 1972. He has surpassed 32,000 Big Macs thus far. Jennifer is stunned. His cholesterol was officially verified in 2011. It was 156.
Oh,
okay, my cholesterol has never been 156.
Well, you're on the wrong diet, Vic.
It's unfair. Okay, Mary Katharine, I do want to end. We received this letter for you and me from a listener in Israel. So I'm just going to read it to you now.
All
okay?
Right.
Dear Mr. Matus, I'm not going to use his name, by the way. I wanted to thank you both, you and Mary Katharine Ham, for your latest episode on the war in Israel. I currently live in Jerusalem and am seeing and feeling this crisis firsthand. Many of my friends have already been called up to active duty, and I am currently waiting for my own call. Not a single person I know has not been affected by this attack. Some of my friends were at the concert, and not all of them made it back.
Oh.
I'm seeing this country come together like it has, unfortunately, so many times before. However, this attack was so severe and so cruel that we are still dealing with the shock and the pain of it. Right now, it is so important to hear from our friends from around the world that they feel our pain and that we have their support. So from the bottom of my heart, I thank you both for recording that episode. He's a longtime listener of our show and the Substandard, Subbeacon podcasts, and since he was at Georgetown. Even when I moved to Israel after my graduation and drafted to the IDF, I still listen to your podcasts. They helped me relax during some of the most intense times of my life. Thank you, and Hoya Saxa.
Oh, my goodness. We are honored to have you as a listener. Stay safe. You're in our prayers. I assume at this point that many, many, many people I know either know someone who is gone or who is in danger. So may their memories be a blessing to you, and everyone else is lifted up who is still with us and fighting that good fight. And it is the predisposition of the UN, of the global intellectuals, of the elite to immediately turn on Israel is so strong that those who are not interested in turning on Israel and making Israel stay its hand need to keep talking about it. So we will keep talking about it here. And we appreciate you very much as a listener. By the way, speaking of how unprecedented this is, I saw a news story today that El Al, which is the Israeli airline, for the first time in its history, will fly on the Sabbath to get
as many
reservists into the country. So that's happening this week.
Amazing.
So our thoughts are always with you guys. I want to note also before we finish, this week it is both our 200th episode and our 2-year anniversary. So have enjoyed being with all you hammerheads all this time. And it occurs to me that, of course, yes, my kid is about to turn 2 because we started this podcast when I was super pregnant. And I was like, you know what? It's fine. I'll come back right after I had the baby. And then I did.
I thought for sure we'd have 3 weeks off.
Nah, 4 days.
I don't know what the maternity leave policy was for Getting Hammered. It apparently was 2 days. That wraps up this episode of Getting Hammered. Remember, you can subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play, I was going to say Stitcher, and YouTube. You could follow me on Twitter at Victorina Matus.
Yes, we are at Getting Hammered Podcast on Instagram and YouTube. I'm at MK Hammer on Twitter. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for getting hammered responsibly. This has been a Nebulous Media Podcast.